This is a show about the diversity of academic and experiential backgrounds of people working in patient safety. My name is Ivan. I am a lab rat turned infection preventionist. While struggling to find work, I reached out to a friend for support. Our chat turned into a LinkedIn post that showed me that many people in our field were in the same situation. The purpose of the Safety Spectrum podcast is to celebrate credential, educational, and experiential diversity, to share the values and success stories of non-traditional staff in quality patient safety and infection prevention, to advocate for competency-based versus credential-limited hiring, and to increase awareness of the importance of the infection preventionist and other roles in the healthcare safety sector.
A man and a legend, Ebow H-Smith has worn very many hats in healthcare. EMT, paramedic, surgery tech, sterile processing, healthcare administration, infection prevention, quality and patient safety, both in the private sector and in our U.S. military. Ebow is a man on a mission to rid us of all the silos that so impede progress in our facilities. Welcome to the Safety Spectrum.
Good morning, Ebow. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Ivan. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. How are you doing yourself?
I'm doing all right. We are going to jump right in and ask you to describe your career progression. You've had a very interesting arc from where you started to where you are right now.
Oh, yeah. So my career progression can be described as interesting. It all began somewhat time in college. I think my freshman year. I was bored at home and I saw a volunteer firefighter EMT ad. So that is where it started, as a volunteer firefighter EMT. And that side progressed to paramedic, and through the military also was able to earn flight paramedic status as an enlisted. Then that is where it all began. So after college and spending some time in the military as an health administrative officer, I transitioned to the private sector. Started out as a surgical tech and finally ended up in sterile processing, many roles in sterile processing world, and finally now a system infection preventionist for medical device reprocessing. So that is a brief career progression for me. And just being brief, there has been some stuff in there, but if we want to talk about my overall career progression, I think we're going to be here all day because I'm one of those people.
What was the impetus to get into sterile processing? You said you were a paramedic for a while, and then you got into the OR. How did you make that shift, or why did you make that shift from the OR to sterile processing?
So, full disclosure here, it wasn't my intention to move to sterile processing. It was one of the usual everyday operating room work that I decided to go to sterile processing because there was some defect with our tray. So I was gonna go there with not the best intentions, but
you were going there to sort them out.
Basically, yeah. That was back then, but now knowing better, it wasn't the best idea, but I'm glad it happened. So I went there and I was like, this looks extremely refreshing. And low-key, I don't have a surgeon on my head or a surgeon yelling to me because I had the wrong instrument. This sounds like something I could try. So That was then, and I never left until recently.
Okay, all right. And according to your LinkedIn, you transitioned out of SPD into more educator roles. How did that happen?
So transitioning from SPD operations and SPD technician into an educator role happened naturally. Um, so I was lucky enough to have great mentors in SPD, and one of the mentors told me I was actually going to go for a supervisory role in SPD. And I was told because of my demeanor and my ethics, supervisory role wasn't the best for me at that time. And I should leverage my skills into education and management because I know what it is and I love to teach.
All right. So you educator led you into quality. When did the CPHQ come into the picture?
So CPHQ came into the picture when I was initially a sterile processing lead tech. Um, I was starting to explore other roles in healthcare. And full disclosure, my ultimate goal is to be a chief quality officer. So I was trying to see how I can map that from sterile processing into that role. And as fate has it, some years down the road, I was able to transition into sterile processing educator slash quality assurance. And now that quality is part of my role, I needed to actually get more education and the certification to actually prove to myself and my colleagues that yes, I can do this job. And CPHQ actually formalized the connection between SPD, infection prevention, and quality. It validated the importance of data driven improvement and it aligned with my leadership development goals overall.
Wow. And then you got into IP. How did that happen?
Well, I would say IP is a natural evolution from sterilization sciences to prevention strategy.
Yes.
We recognize that reprocessing, IS, and infection prevention, it focused on bridging the gap between SPD and IP, specifically through shared governance and risk reduction. At least that is to me how that bridge and how I got into IP because we all have shared goals and shared vision at the end of the day. Sterile processing is basically the front line in prevention of HIAs and surgical site infections.
Okay. It's interesting how, as I've talked to people from different backgrounds, um, there are many things that reasonably lead to infection prevention. Sterile processing, as you're saying, very reasonably leads to infection prevention, as does the study of microbiology, as does, bedside nursing care and respiratory therapy. And at least for me, it brings up this reality that infection prevention is everybody's business. It goes beyond just nurses and doctors. Infection prevention is for everyone in a healthcare setting. So that's interesting. And are you certified in infection prevention and control through CIBIC?
Yes. So specific, I am actually certified. I have my CIC. Um, that was actually prior to my transition into a formal IP role. During my sterile processing leadership roles, I was partnering with my system IPs to actually round on clinics, especially those that reprocess instruments or have instrument storage, and basically see if they meet the criteria and the standards and guidelines established. So I was familiar, and it was my goal to be certified IP before I even thought about transitioning into an IP role. So like I stated earlier, I am a lifelong learner, and certification actually validates my lifelong learnings. And certification is just the minimum standard for being in any role. What you do with it and how you progress is what truly speaks to what you're about and your role in that particular field or industry. So, yes, I am certified through CBEC, and that is just beginning. So,
Wonderful. I have noticed that at least with your CIC and your CPHQ, you got that certification before you jumped into the role, which most of the rest of the world get into the role first. But I like that. I like you know exactly what you're getting into, right? What advice would you give someone following in your footsteps? What advice would you give someone whether they are, a surgical tech or they're an SPD and they aspire to be a chief quality officer? Like,
so I will give you 5 points. The first one would be to master the sciences. Master the science. No matter where you are, master your industry. Know your industries in and out. Advocate for your industry. So if it's, for example, sterile processing, know everything there is to know about sterile processing. Get involved in your sterile processing association. If it's standards development, get involved. If you're a surgical tech, know everything you should know about surgical technology. Know some stuff about what your iron circulators do. Even better, get with your sterile processing technicians and learn a little bit about their instrument reprocessing workflow so you better understand everything there is to know about your specific field. Number two would be document your knowledge. Continuous lifelong learning is very important. And as you learn and you gain that knowledge, apply it and document it. Three would be to seek cross-departmental experience. Yes, I am a surgical tech. I don't have to stay surgical tech. I can go to SPD and I say, hey, you guys need some help in SPD. Or go to another department. Hey, I have experience in this and this. Do you guys have any project going on that can use a fresh eye from somebody who is not currently embedded in the workflow to see what I can bring to the table? So seeking that cross-departmental experience is extremely helpful. Number four would be to pursue education and credentials. And as you already know and you stated, I actually obtained my education and my certifications before I got into those roles down the line. And fifth but not the least, you should advocate for visibility in patient safety and healthcare quality. I know healthcare quality is a different side of healthcare, but believe it or not, it has impact in IP and every role in healthcare. So those would be my 5 steps for anybody who will want to follow.
that is brilliant and very well stated. Thank you for sharing that. It's definitely a very well thought out, you know, a very well thought out process that you have there, and very holistic too. I like how you you and this is something that I'll get into. You are integrating departments and roles that have traditionally been very siloed, and because of being siloed are constantly in contention, you know. So yeah, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. What are the highlights of your career so far? What are your high points?
Oh, my high point would be leading multi hospital SPD transformation and developing scalable toolkits. I will also throw into that mentoring leaders and creating governance models like linking SPD and IT and healthcare quality department because we all have shared goals. So those will be my highlights of my career or my high points. Um, yeah, I like the challenge.
And a challenge it is. You are weaving with threads that have historically been considered non-compatible. Any low points you want to share?
Oh, a lot. Working in SPD or overall perioperative services.
Wherever you want to go.
Um, there are moments of burnout and under recognition, especially for SPD work. Um, Most of the time, SPD is termed as an entry level role or entry level position. But if you actually take a look at the workflow and what is involved in those processes, you will realize that this is not just an entry level role because there is some chemistry involved, there is some anatomy and physiology involved, there is a lot of critical thinking involved. And when you get to the leadership aspects, there is a lot of data and there is a lot of cross departmental interaction involved. So moments of burnout and under recognition in SPD, I would say would be a low point. But guess what? I was able to turn those into advocacy for leadership pipelines and workforce visibility. So even
Mhm.
though it was a low point, it wasn't a low point in the sense I was able to leverage those low points to turn into something special. I was able to advocate for certification recognition for some of my technicians and some of my health systems that I was a leader at. An example would be additional pay increase for additional certification in the SPD role, career ladders, and finally reimbursing the staff for certification and recertification. So great things came from those low points.
Nice. So um, yeah, as they say, made lemonade,
With
right?
the lemons.
So going back to the silos, you've worked in different departments that tend to be siloed. As I've said, you're weaving something with threads that have been considered non-compatible for a long time. How do you think we can collaborate better? SPD, you have some experience in surgical services. We'll even go as far back to your time as an EMT. Given all that you know now, how how can we collaborate better?
Yes, definitely. I personally believe collaboration must be intentional.
Okay.
Um, as a direct user of healthcare, I've witnessed the negative outcomes when there is no collaboration between departments. Um, for collaboration to be intentional, we have to have shared dashboard, shared cross training opportunities, and joint quality goals. Quality and IP is everybody's department. Even though we have people working in those specific department. But if we look at healthcare overall, healthcare quality and patient safety is everybody's end goal. For example, IP, SPD, and the quality department can collaborate. There are a lot of work processes in SP that need quality improvement. So working together, these three departments can actually integrate into each other with monthly meetings, cross-training opportunities, uh, initiating an official IP performance improvement process or process improvement process, for example, decontamination, and just look at the process and how can we optimize this decontamination process. When we optimize this decontamination process, one of the outcomes would be decrease in turnover time, and that will also increase the OR first case on time start, and that will have a domino effect to other departments. Like, okay, there's no delay in the OR, so PACU is on time. PACU is on time. That means that a bed on the floor is freed up. When that bed on the floor is freed up, the OR doesn't have the ED doesn't have to board any patients in the ED and can just directly transfer that patient to the room on the floor. So working together in those multidisciplinary teams, we are able to recognize things that were not initially on our radar.
Excellent. In my last facility, I worked on several lean projects, and in a lean A3, there is a position for an external observer. And one of the things that happened was we had an external observer from SPD when we were working on a C. diff project, and it like just their engagement was so inspiring. It led many people on that team to kind of go, hey, so tell us what's happening in your world. You know, before meetings, you're talking to each other, and we ended up like I developed an ally in SPD in that process, you know, and so I had someone to call on, and I'd go, hey, I have a question about this. That was accidental collaboration, but you were saying we need to be intentional. We need to seek out those opportunities.
Yes, that is exactly. We have to be intentional about it.
Yeah. And I also like how you just showed how improving a process in SPD affects many more departments than just SPD. I think if that is something that, you know, infection preventionists, quality people, even SPD, anyone in healthcare, as they think about improving their processes, looking at how their improvement affects other departments definitely fosters collaboration and buy-in from other departments who may have to change how they're working in order to meet this new process.
Yes, that is actually a great opportunity in healthcare. Like you stated earlier, we tend to work in silos. And when we start to break down those silos, we recognize those opportunities and downstream effects or upstream effects of what each department's contribution to the whole process of healthcare is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of my academic interests is called system dynamics, and that's exactly what it's about, where, you know, how does improvement in one department improve or affect, you know, work in another department, and just looking at, as you say, downstream and upstream effects of process changes. Because of our silos, we tend to sabotage other departments. You know, lab says this is going to help us, this is going to help our turnaround time, and they make a decision just in the lab, and by doing so, they sabotage everyone else, you know, which does not help all of the silos. It actually reinforces those silos. So yeah, that's excellent. Quality and infection prevention. Patient safety is everyone's business. If you are in healthcare, patient safety is your business, and whatever you're trying to do, if it does not make the patient safer, then should you really be doing it? You know, excellent. What are your thoughts on turnover in infection prevention?
We can be able to address this with succession planning, mentorship, and aligned leadership development program. That is what I see. Some of our IP departments are trying to fix this with micro credentials and overall improvement to our career ladder. IP, just like star processing, sometimes is considered as a cost center, not a revenue generating department. One of my dissertation during my DBA program was about effect of workforce on the aging population, how the aging population will affect our workforce in our various departments and in our various facilities. And it is not just IP and star processing. This is a big issue in healthcare, from nurses to physicians to anesthesiologists, to surgeons. Um, could you believe that in 2030, which is about 5 years from now, there will be a shortage of anesthesiologists. There wouldn't be enough anesthesiologists for the amount of healthcare cases or operating room cases that we are expected to have in that year. So I
Wow.
think it's about time that we start looking at healthcare as a whole through different lenses and develop programs. So that is my spiel on that. For star processing, oh boy, oh boy. um, I have many ideas on star processing on how to improve our workforce and the turnover. Um, I see there are a lot of organizations out there trying to help with that. We have these private schools over there. But one of the requirements for certification in one of our associations is to have at least a minimum of 400 hours and on. Um, Full disclosure, I tend to browse Reddit a lot, and in some of the star processing subreddits, there is frustration in there on technicians or new technicians trying to get in the field, not able to find positions. And we have a lot of vacancies in star processing, but everybody wants an experienced technician.
Oh,
We
okay.
need to focus our efforts on the upcoming generation, the upcoming new technicians. We need to build training and orientation programs that will set them up for success in the near future when we are no longer able to manage these departments or be there for these departments. So we need to look at our overall training and workforce development pipeline. And that also includes leadership, succession, and leadership development pipelines.
I find that this is a multifaceted problem, and the people that I have spoken to about it, everyone kind of their brings in their own perspective, and like hospital acquired infections, there's rarely going to be this one thing that we need to do. there are multiple things that need to be done, and some of them can be done asynchronously, but others kind of need to be done in order because one affects the other, and so yes, it is a complex, multifaceted problem, and I am glad that there are more conversations about it. APIC is talking a lot about turnover, and I'm sure HPSA is doing the same. Whether it is turnover or just recruitment, because I think both those two fields have the same problem with recruitment and turnover is kind of a big deal in both circles. So yes, excellent. How do we talked about low points. You've mentioned burnout a few times. How do you or how have you managed the strain of the job? SPD, IP, both, even surgical tech, both very thankless roles, right? How have you or how do you manage the strain of the job? How do you stay sane?
So I'm going to answer this from 2 points of view. From the
Okay.
professional standpoint and from the personal standpoint. From professional standpoint, I will say I build professional networks and practice reflexive leadership. What does that mean is when I experience something, I know, for example, that my technicians are also experiencing the same thing or something similar to that. So when that in effect affects their productivity, I'm more empathetic or sympathetic to their situations and just don't jump directly into a corrective action and have those conversations and provide guides on how to solve whatever it is or whatever that strength is. I also maintain perspective and align my effort with purpose. Okay, this is what it is. This too shall pass. And now we have that knowledge and that experience to tackle it when it comes up again. And lastly, resilience also stems from clarity of mission. I know what my mission is. I know what my goal is. So I see most of this pain as just a temporary roadblock or a temporary detour. That is what I do from the professional standpoint. But from my day to day personal standpoint, I have hobbies that usually help me with this. I dabble in electronic photography, and very recently I have taken to the range to relieve those pent up stress. So getting a hobby seems to help with the strain of the job
Uh-huh.
a lot.
So professionally, developing empathy and sympathy through your professional networks and being clear on your mission, right? Recognizing the little roadblocks and stumbling blocks. And then personally, you just lean into your hobbies, right?
Basically, yes.
Okay, excellent. Is there anything else that you want to talk about? Anything that you found exciting or?
uh, One thing that I want to talk about is, as you already know, I'm all about collaboration and multidisciplinary team. I want to emphasize that, especially in healthcare, there is strength in our diversity.
Mhm.
Um, Most people may not realize that in this time frame, but having people with different lived experience and different background actually makes our healthcare team stronger instead of weaker. So I am all for diversity and multidisciplinary teams as it makes us better and improve our patient care to our patients. Because remember, our patients come to us in their most vulnerable time of need, and it's on us to provide them with the best quality care that we can provide them at that moment. And we will be able to do that through diverse teams and working together as a harmonious system. So that is my feel.
That is a wonderful soapbox. That is brilliant. Well said. Thank you for sharing that. That is definitely one of the things that this podcast is trying to highlight the reality that our teams, be it an IP team, an SPD team, any team, is going to be better off with, as you said, variable backgrounds, variable education experiences, even variable age groups. We find that there are certain departments that have people of a certain age, and that can be disadvantageous in the long run. Whereas if you have a greater variety of age groups and backgrounds and things like that, yes, I totally agree. That makes for a much better team. Um, Excellent. Well, Ebo, thank you very much for spending time with me. Thank you for talking to me, and we have learned a lot here today from you. Not only about how to plan your steps as you go through your career. You have given us very clear direction on how to improve collaboration, on turnover, and how to manage the strain of work. So thank you. So much wisdom. I appreciate your time.
And thank you also, and thank you to your audience, and thank you for bringing me on. It has been a pleasure talking with you today.